This is Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman. As the world marked International Women's Day Wednesday, the New York Times began a new project highlighting the lives of remarkable women who never had an obituary in the paper until now. The list might surprise you. It includes the pioneering anti-lynching journalist Ida B. Wells, the writer, the poet Sylvia Plath, Chu Jin, who was known as China's Joan of Arc, the groundbreaking photographer Diane Arbus, the woman who helped engineer the Brooklyn Bridge, Emily Warren Roebling, Charlotte Bronte, who wrote Jane Eyre, Henrietta Lacks, whose cells led to a medical revolution, Ada Lovelace, who's considered to be the world's first computer programmer. None of their obituaries appeared in the Times. The New York Times is calling their new project Overlooked. It's part of an effort to make up for the paper's 167-year history of focusing largely on men, overwhelmingly on white men, in the obituary pages. We're joined now by Amy Padnani, digital editor of Obituaries at the New York Times, who came up with this idea. Well, the good news when I read the New York Times obituaries over the years, when I've read them, is that it just seemed like women and people of color rarely died.
This was some feedback we frequently got from our readers. Why don't we see more women and minorities in your pages? And that was something that bothered me personally. I just joined Obituaries in early 2017, and as you know, the national debate on race was heating up, and the conversation about gender inequality was starting to take hold again. And it really got me thinking, as a woman of color and as an editor at the New York Times, what can I do to advance this conversation? All of these people were coming out of the shadows to tell stories of injustices, and it really resonated with me. So I came across in my day-to-day research a woman who had been credited with bringing tennis to the United States from Bermuda. Her name is Mary Outerbridge. She started the first tennis court on Staten Island, of all places, and I used to live on Staten Island. It's a place that's near and dear to my heart, and I thought, what a neat nugget about history. So I checked to see if we had done an obituary on Mary Outerbridge, and we hadn't. So I kind of tucked that away in the back of my mind. And through my research, I started coming across more and more names like this. We, as you noted, came across some really surprising ones like Diane Arbus and Sylvia Plath.
So let's talk about who they are. Diane Arbus.
Sure, the brilliant photographer Diane Arbus. She was known for photographing people kind of on the outskirts of society, sideshow people, dwarfs. Some wondered if she did it for attention in a way, but others really thought the photos were remarkable and artistic. And she had a lot of fame in her own lifetime, so we were surprised when there was no obituary about her death.
And Ida B. Wells.
Same, yeah. She was, as you noted, she was a pioneer in the anti-lynching movement and a journalist who was one of the first to produce a newspaper by a Black person for Black people. And in her lifetime, she also was extremely famous. We even had a little front page blurb about her marriage, but we didn't have anything about her death.
I want to go to my colleague, Juan Gonzalez, who wrote about Ida B. Wells in his book, News for All the People, the epic story of race in the American media. He talked about her on our show when his book came out.
Ida B. Wells was one of the early muckrakers that is not known as a muckraker in the official histories. But in the late 19th century, she was the editor of a paper in Memphis, and three of her friends were lynched by a mob, and she began a crusade against that lynching, and her newspaper was burned down while she was out of town. And she then went across the country exposing the epidemic of lynching in America of African Americans, and became a really the first crusading journalist on this issue. And she's known, again, in the histories of the Black press as one of the giants of the press, but is, again, rarely mentioned or talked about in official histories of the press in America. But she was a key figure, and not only was involved with the NAACP later on, met with presidents over issues of racial discrimination, was a major figure in the late 19th and early 20th century.
But her obituary didn't make it into the Times. What about Sylvia Plath? Tell us who she is.
Sylvia Plath, the famous poet who wrote The Bell Jar. She also was extremely famous in her lifetime. She committed suicide at a fairly young age. And we also...
In 1963.
That's right. And we were also really surprised to learn that there was nothing. We had stories about her writing, but we didn't have an obituary covering her death.
American poet, American novelist, short story writer, born in Boston. I wanted to go to a clip of Sylvia Plath reading from part of her very famous, painful poem, Daddy.
You do not do any more, black shoe in which I have lived like a foot for 30 years, poor and white, barely daring to breathe or chew. Daddy, I have had to kill you. You died before I had time, marble heavy, a bag full of God, ghastly statue with one gray toe big as a Frisco seal, and a head in the freakish Atlantic, where it pours bean green over blue in the waters off beautiful Nauset. I used to pray to recover you, ach du.
And I want to turn to that documentary, Going Where I've Never Been, the photography of Diane Arbus. In this clip, we hear Arbus's friend Mary Claire Costello reading Arbus's musings on photography. Diane Arbus also committed suicide. Is that right?
I was just curious. It would be very hard to say to someone, I want to come to your house and have you talk to me and tell me the story of your life. I mean, people are going to say you're crazy. Plus, they're going to keep mighty guarded. But the camera is a kind of license. And for a lot of people, they want to be paid that much attention. And that's a reasonable kind of attention to be paid.
Nella Larson.
And that was reading the words of Diane Arbus. Nella Larson. Amy.
So Nella Larson was a literary star during the Harlem Renaissance in the 1920s and 1930s. She wrote a couple of books that are still discussed in classrooms today, addressing issues of race and pressures that middle-class black families would feel. And So she was accused of plagiarism later on in her life, and she eventually withdrew from the limelight. She died alone in her apartment, and her body was found days later. So she kind of died in obscurity.
Explain this. I've got the section that's coming out on Sunday. The New York Times, the front page, it's almost white, but it's got the photographs leaching through from the inside of these 15 women to the outside.
This was a concept we came up with. We wanted it to have that feeling of these women are no longer overlooked. They're now coming out of the woodworks. They're coming out of the shadows, and we're finally giving them their due.
What percentage of people in the obituaries are still white men?
About 4 out of 5 obits are on white men. On men. I don't have the figures for people of color. So, yeah, about 80% of our obituaries are about men.
So how will this affect the obituaries going forward?
Well, I'm really hoping that it will help raise awareness and continue the conversation. We also recently hired our very first gender editor, Jessica Bennett, and we have a race-related team, and their goals are to infuse the entire newsroom with a different way of thinking. So they're not relegated to this one corner of the newspaper. They're everywhere, and they're really tasked with changing the tone, the white male tone of media and of the New York Times, and bringing new perspectives. So I'm very hopeful that will help with our initiative, too.
Chu Jin. Can you talk about who she is, she was?
That's one of my favorite pieces. She was a feminist, a revolutionary in China. She was a poet, and she was a cross-dresser. She fought against norms for women. She liked to make bombs. She liked swords. She liked winemaking. She left her family and decided to study. And this is 1906 when she returns to China and engages in an uprising against the government and fought for women. She was eventually executed. But her story is one of the most powerful in that package.
But didn't make it into the Times in her day.
It didn't. We didn't really have, this is my speculation, we didn't have as much of an international focus. We often focused largely on New York even, or just the United States.
How do the decisions get made?
These days, we get submissions from all over, from readers, from social media, from other newspapers, wire services, and every day we meet and we look at a list of all the candidates, and we judge based on newsworthiness. Did that person make news in their life? If so, then their death is news as well. We do a lot of research. We talk to people who knew them. We read old articles, dig through our archives, so really do our homework.
One of the New York Times obits that will appear on Sunday is titled Marsha P. Johnson, a transgender pioneer and activist who is a fixture of Greenwich Village street life. I want to turn to Marsha Johnson in her own words. Listen carefully.
I learned how to survive. 1963, for better or worse. And I said, I got the Lord on my side, and I took him in my heart with me, and I came to the city, for better or worse. And he said, you might wind up with nothing, because, me and Jesus are always talking. And I said, honey, I don't care. I never have nothing ever till the day I die. All I want is my freedom. And that's how I came, and that's how I've been living here ever since I came, day after day, on whatever I have. I don't even care if I do to all these colors tonight.
Tell us more about who Marsha P. Johnson was.
So Marsha P. Johnson was a trans pioneer. She was very active in the uprising at Stonewall in Greenwich Village that led to the first gay pride parade, that led to a lot of other rights and recognition for gay people. She was also a prostitute, which she was not afraid of. She was arrested more than 100 times, and she was asked many times, what does the P in your name stand for? And she said, it stands for pay it no mind. There are a lot of great details like that in her obituary as well. It's a great read.
And then there is the author Charlotte Bronte. Among other books, Jane Eyre is hers, but she didn't make it into the Times.
No, she died in, I believe, 1855. We started publishing in 1851. I don't know if that's what had something to do with it, but for whatever reason, she didn't receive one.
It would be fascinating to see who did make it into the Times on those obituary pages in 1855.
That's one of the things I'm looking into, because I'm really curious. We didn't have obituaries every single day back then like we do now, and the modern obituary is very different. At times, we were like society pages where women were actually referred to by their husband's name, Mrs. Husband's name. So digging through to find out if these women had obituaries was a complicated process. So there are a lot of strange things that we uncovered when we were looking back.
Now, people may have learned about Henrietta Lacks, who weren't Henrietta Lacks's family, through the remarkable book that I think is still on the bestseller list by Rebecca Skloot, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. Talk about who this remarkable woman was and the role she played and continues to play in medical research today.
She was a poor, uneducated black woman whose cells were used for medical research unknowingly, and it has led to treatments for cancer, treatments for really common illnesses today. She had these regenerative cells that were unique, and they aided in these medical discoveries that have been benefiting people for decades. So it's pretty amazing that she never got the recognition for it.
And people can also see the amazing film, Oprah Winfrey film, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. At the end of this series that is coming out, the special section is beginning on Sunday, called Overlooked, but not ending on Sunday, right?
That's right. This is continuing on. We have already a couple of dozen more stories that we're going to put out probably every week, one or more. It could vary. But it seems that there's a real hunger and a real need for it. We had a form people could fill out to submit names for additional subjects, and in 24 hours we had 1,200 submissions.
So you have a fascinating article at the end of this section, Why Most Obits Are Still of White Men. Explain.
This was written by the head of the Obituaries desk, and we often say that obituaries are backward-looking. We're not representing society today. We're representing society from a couple of generations ago. And a couple of generations ago, women and people of color were not really invited to the table to make a difference. They had to push through barriers. And so often they had to work very hard to be recognized. So the obits that we published today are representative of that. And that's part of the reason why there's such an imbalance. White men were more invited to make a difference. White men were recognized for the differences, for their contributions to society.
But as you point out, it's still going on today. The overwhelming majority of men in the obits, not that anyone wants to be on an obit page, but that the overwhelming majority of obituaries, 80%, are still white men.
Yeah, because we're still providing a rear view look at what society looked like. So we're hoping, I mean, naturally going forward, we're starting already to see more women and people of color. We have a list of advance obituaries for people who have not yet died, and that list happens to be even more diverse than what you see day to day. We just have to wait for those people to die.
Not that anyone wants to get into that category. The last page simply is a white page that says, "The truth will not be silent, the truth will not be contained, the truth has a voice." So you have your section Obits, and then you've got the Omits.
Mm-hmm. That's a good way to put it. This coincided with our truth campaign about our commitment to good journalism and uncovering the truth. So that's part of the reason why that's there.
So I want to end going from Henrietta Lacks' doctors culturing her cells without permission from her family and using it for medical research that has saved so many countless lives, to Madhubala, an Indian film actress who appeared in classic films in Hindi cinema, a Bollywood legend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she appeared in dozens of films in different languages. She led a poetically tragic short life that's often been compared to Marilyn Monroe's life. She was an actress whose father pushed her to continue acting even when she had reached her limit. And she also had a tragic love life, never got to marry the man that she wanted to. And she also died young of an illness. So,
well, and finally, Amy, you are really curating this whole section. Talk about how, when you came to the Times, you understood what was happening and what it meant to push this forward. Did you face any resistance, and what you're doing now?
Surprisingly, no. I thought that maybe there would be some, but everybody has embraced it so far. There's been so much excitement. In fact, about 50 writers in the building jumped up and said, "What can I do? I want to write something." And then we had a team of editors sit in one room and edit 40 pieces in 1 week. So there are photo editors who are involved. Pretty much from every corner of the newsroom, people are involved. And the fact that we have all these submissions now shows what an important project it is. I think people recognize that from the beginning.
Thank you so much, Amy Padnani, digital editor of Obituaries at the New York Times. And again, we will link to this special section that begins on Sunday, Overlooked, revisiting 167 years of New York Times history to provide obituaries to women who never got them. If people want to make suggestions, where can they go?
From that very page, nytimes.com/overlooked, there's a link to the form where they can fill it out.
Well, Amy Padnani, I want to thank you so much for being with us, for coming up with this very important idea. We'll see if filling in the gaps of the past makes a difference in the present and the future, but we're going to link to this remarkable special section at democracynow.org. It's called Overlooked. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for joining us.